The Lindsay Clancy case has to be one of the most perfect examples of you can literally do one of the most horrendous things somebody could do. And somehow there are women out there, a lot of women, that are still like, this is the husband's fault. This is her doctor's fault. For those who do not know, this woman strangled her 3 children to death. Young children, below the ages of 10, I believe. And the defense that the lawyers are going with is she was suffering from severe postpartum depression and wasn't in her right mind. And now, who knows? That could be true. But, she still murdered 3 children. And do you not think serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, Nicholas Cruz, you think these people were mentally stable? Do they get a pass because, they just mentally weren't right? But there are comments like this. I think the husband set all of this up to start over. He couldn't care less about her, already remarried and start a new family. She murdered 3 of his children, bro. Her husband and doctors need jail time as well. They failed her. She murdered 3 children. This is the most like sound comment, and this is still like baffling. She's clearly mentally unwell and has been grossly failed by everybody around her. However, she did commit the most heinous of crimes, so she does need to be sentenced to something. And she also needs to get help. It's a mess all around, but she definitely wasn't well when she did what she did. Almost every serial killer, every mass killer, isn't mentally well when it's going on. Why does this one deserve a pass? This infantilization that we do to women is insane. I can understand, and obviously I'm, never been pregnant, but some things, a little bit too far. And I would argue, murdering your 3 children, that is one of them. So go click the case if you want to go see. Maybe I'm missing some things out, but wow.
This is Chris Watts. He murdered his entire family. In fact, it was so brutal that they nicknamed him the Family Annihilator, and he's serving a life sentence in prison for that, but now he's getting married while he's in prison. His fiance's name is Lindsay Henderson, but she's already started going by Lizzie Watts, taking on his last name. She is a 39-year-old professional who moved from Cleveland, Ohio to Wisconsin to be closer to where he's at in prison. I guess my question is, what is wrong with women? This man murdered his wife and 2 children, and this chick is bending over backwards to be next in line. What do y'all think about this? Let me know down in the comments.
This is one of the most disturbing sites on the dark web. Cannibalism is happening everywhere around us, and we have no clue. One night, me and my friends decided that we were gonna go on the dark web. And of course, we decided to click a random link from the hidden wiki. The link we clicked changed my life forever. It made me honestly open my eyes to the world. As soon as we clicked the link, we were in a slew of pictures and guides on how to cook people. But this page wasn't a joke. This page had so much information on what specific parts to cut, what specific parts taste the best, and what parts to get rid of. It even went as far as telling us exactly how to cook someone while they're actually alive. Don't ever go somewhere you're not supposed to be. I had to learn that lesson the hard way.
A court was reduced to tears as they watched harrowing footage of the Southport stabbing, including the moment one girl tried to escape but was dragged back inside. Axel Rudakabana has today been handed a tool.
Okay, we need to talk about the Dean Withers rape allegations because there's actually a deeper level to all of it. Firstly, are the allegations true? Well, currently there is no credible evidence to suggest that they are. The screenshots of this supposed conversation appear to be manipulated, and the photos used to run that account appear to be stolen from a real 13-year-old girl in Australia. In fact, that girl has since come forward herself showing her original unedited photos next to the doctored ones, saying she is not involved in any of this. But despite all of that, the Dean Withers accused of rape story has got millions and millions of views across the internet, triggering death threats, bomb threats, and they're clearly starting to take a toll.
They finally found their way to get to me. They're always looking for that way. And they found it.
But here's the part that not many people are speaking about. If you look at the videos and posts fueling these allegations, they're not really debating on whether the allegations are true or false. In fact, many have openly said they don't believe them either. This all seems to be fueled by left versus right politics.
I think you're hypocritical because you falsely accuse people without evidence, but get angry when people falsely accuse you without evidence.
They claim Dean in the past has backed the Believe All Victims movement and called people, including Trump, pedophiles and rapists with little evidence. And so many are using these allegations, even if untrue, as a see how it feels political point. The major problem is this time this political back and forth has come at the expense of a real 13-year-old girl.
People you will meet in heaven. Jesus, the central figure of Christianity, who Christians believe welcomes believers into eternal life. Adam and Eve, the first humans described in the Bible, whose story begins humanity's journey. Moses, the prophet who led the Israelites out of Egypt and received the 10 Commandments. Noah, the man who built the ark and survived the great flood with his family. David, the famous king of Israel who defeated Goliath and became known for his faith. Abraham, one of the most important biblical patriarchs and a major figure of faith. Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples and a key leader in the early Christian church. Paul, the apostle who spread Christianity throughout much of the ancient world.
This is a crazy true story about the real-life vampire woman. This lady's name is Maria, and she is a 42-year-old woman that is best known as the female vampire. She grew up in a very religious family and decided to tattoo her entire body. She has titanium horns and even has permanent fangs. Not only is she a mother of 4, but she is also a lawyer. She gives talks on domestic abuse to help women all over the world.
This is the most dangerous prisoner in the entire world. In 2018, a woman who lived right near a prison in California got home late one night and immediately went to bed. But around 3 a.m. that night, she heard footsteps coming from downstairs, and assuming it was her roommate, she went downstairs to greet her. She called out to her roommate who didn't answer, but then a big man appeared right in her doorway. She immediately ran upstairs and jumped in her closet to hide. As she hid in her closet, trying not to make a sound, all she could hear is the footsteps of the man walking towards her room. After 2 hours of hiding, she finally got the courage to go get her cell phone and call the police. But as she began describing the man, the police stopped her dead in her tracks. Before I continue, I just discovered a brand new app where you can prank your friends by changing their text messages. Click the link in my bio to try it out for free. It turns out the man was a 7-foot-tall convicted murderer who was still on the loose. You should never swallow your gum, and this is why. Samantha Jenkins was a 17-year-old girl who would chew 14 pieces of gum a day and not always spit it out. One day she was rushed to the hospital after collapsing on the floor. Her mom then found thousands of gum wrappers all over her room. Doctors decided they had to do emergency surgery on her, but before I tell you what happened next, I just discovered the only way for you to go live if you have less than 1,000 followers. Click the link in my bio to download BeGo Live, and now you can go live whenever you want. When doctors opened her up, they found massive piles of gum inside her stomach. Later that day, she passed away because her mineral levels were fatally low, and doctors believed the gum was preventing her body from absorbing it.
This is a true dark web story, part 2. Jacob, a 21-year-old that had a very good friend named Steven. Steven was a very nice but quiet guy. He was also very insecure about his face, because his face had serious skin problems, and it was very hard for him to meet new people. He also had a lot of people making fun of him all the time, and that's what made him stay home almost every day. And Jacob was his only friend. Day by day, Jacob started noticing that Steven's emotions were getting darker. He was addicted to caffeine soft drinks all the time, and his appearance was getting worse. One day on the weekend, Steven gave Jacob a call so he can come over and chill and surf through some crazy things on the deep web. Steven told Jacob that he spends hours every day enjoying the stimulating videos on the deep web. He somehow felt like he can escape reality from the deep web. On another day, where Jacob was at Steven's place, Steven showed Jacob this website that he recently found on the deep web. It showed many pictures of people's skins and bones being separated. Jacob was completely disgusted, but Steven found interest in that website. The website offers a service that literally says, "Start a new life. Will make you have a new face." It was some sort of illegal plastic surgery of removing people's faces and transplanting them on clients that wanted them. Jacob was pretty sure that it was a fake site and all of it's a joke, but Steven unfortunately sent an email to the owners of that site. And a few days later, Steven disappeared. It was official, and it was reported that Steven was indeed missing till this day. Years went by, and Jacob still misses Stephen very much. Jacob, from his house, started noticing a man that does not look familiar. He comes to his neighborhood once a week, stares at his house from across the road for a few minutes, and then just walks away. That man would regularly come every week and would do the exact same thing, while Jacob notices him from his window every single time. Jacob thought maybe that could have been the former owner of the house he lives in, but that was not the case. Was that Stephen showing up with his new face? Because he still misses his friend Jacob.
This is why you should always keep your phone charged. A girl named Marissa came home from school at around 3 p.m. She walked in the door and told her mom that some random number kept calling her all day. Her mom told her the person may have the wrong number and just to ignore it. Marissa said okay and begins to do her homework. A couple hours later, she receives a phone call from the same number. Marissa answers at this time and says, "Hello?" The man then says, "We finally found you. Don't worry, bunny." Marissa begins to panic and tells her mom what just happened. Her mom's face goes blank and says, "What did the man just call you?" Marissa says, "He called me bunny." Her mom yells and says, "Grab your stuff, we need to leave." Marissa, confused, packs her things and gets into the red car. Her mom begins driving fast and turns on the radio. The radio says, "The baby named Marissa who was kidnapped in the hospital 10 years ago has been found and police are searching for a red car." Marissa looks at the woman and says, "Who are you?" The woman looks back and says, "You can call me mommy."
This is the most dangerous prisoner. In 2007, this woman was living near California's state prison. One night she came home late and went straight to bed. But at around midnight, she woke up to the sound of footsteps in her home. So she went downstairs to check, thinking it was her roommate. But when she got downstairs, she made direct eye contact with a 6-foot male walking towards her. She ran instantly to hide in her room and tried her best to block off the door, and she could hear him trying to get in, so she said her last prayers, and that's when she heard police sirens in the distance. The man quickly ran, and when the police got there, they told her she was lucky to be alive, because the man that was at her house had just escaped prison. It was a convicted mass. I guess her prayer worked.
This 16-year-old boy has spent the past 5 years living in a pond because when he tries to leave, his body begins to burn. This is Iqbal from West Bengal, India, and since about the age of 11, he has been eating, sleeping, and living almost entirely submerged in this pond. His neighbors say that they regularly see him floating there from morning until night. Now, he says that he does this to avoid pain because every time he steps out of the water, he gets this unbearable burning sensation on his skin. But despite his family trying everything from hospitals to local healers, no one can figure out what the problem is. However, recently, after a clip of him casually eating snacks in his pond went viral, a wealthy businessman decided to reach out and offer to pay for his medical expenses to review his case. And so now he is being airlifted to Mumbai and admitted to a hospital for special treatment. So hopefully they can figure out what the problem is. And of course, I'll keep you guys updated.
Lindsay Clancy, let's get into it. Everyone keeps asking me what my thoughts are. So Lindsay Clancy is currently on trial for taking the lives of her 3 young children and trying to take her own life. She ultimately was unsuccessful. Her husband, Patrick, comes home, finds her, finds the kids. She's now, she's partially paralyzed and is now facing trial for committing this crime or these crimes. Now, I will say it's very layered. I think that there are, multiple different angles to look at this from. And I think that it really is a much more complex conversation around mental health, postpartum psychosis, postpartum depression. I think there's a lot to it. How the psychiatric community is approaching, mental health, especially with women that have children that are having these dark thoughts. And she was on a number of different medications. So all very complicated and layered. But my opinion on it is sometimes the most plausible case is what happened. I see so many people coming up with all of these crazy conspiracy theories about how the husband, Patrick, must have done this somehow. I think from my perspective, it's very clear that she had a psychotic break. She was in postpartum psychosis. She was on, 9 different medications, clearly not doing very well, expressing ideas of very dark thoughts. I think that the theories about the husband and the husband's new wife, because this is years later, them being part of this big conspiracy, I think is wackadoodle crazy. I think the most plausible situation is likely what happened. I mean, it's kind of like what we're seeing with the Tyler Robinson preliminary trial, right? Or preliminary hearing. Ahead of trial, where people are coming up with all of these crazy, wackadoodle theories about Egyptian planes and exploding microphones and, clones throughout the campus. And it's insane when there's enough evidence to give you a pretty clear and cut dry scenario of what went down, right? Like by the same logic, like Coburg is innocent, right? By the same logic, the glove didn't fit, so you must acquit. OJ's innocent. OJ didn't do it. So I just think we've gotten so true crime obsessed. We love an investigation. I love a conspiracy. If you follow me, I love a conspiracy. Where is the lady? What happened to Miss Nancy Benet Ramsey? I have questions. Lindsay Clancy, I think it's kind of clear. I'm just curious to see how the jury is going to rule and whether or not they will think there was any like premeditation or whether they think that she, was in her right mind. Like those are more of the situations where things get a little dicey. But for the most part, I think it's pretty undisputed that she did this. She was not in her right state of mind. But how we approach mental health and crime, that's going to be interesting.
Serial killers that are eligible for parole a lot sooner than you may think. First up, we have David Berkowitz, and if that name doesn't ring a bell, maybe the Son of Sam or the 44 caliber killer does. Between 1976 and 1977, he shot 13 people, killing 6 of them, saying that a 600-year-old being was talking to him through his neighbor's dog. In a letter he wrote in 2011, he said he would stop seeking parole, which he's been eligible for since 2002. In 2020, he switched it up by saying all he thinks about is parole, but he doesn't feel he deserves it. Now 68 years old, if his parole is granted, he could be released May of this year.
At around 8 p.m. on August 19th, 1962, a 12-year-old boy named Raimundo Marfa da Silva sat near the fireplace in the main room of a shack in rural Brazil. Raimundo lived in this shack with his father Revelino, as well as his 2 younger brothers. And so that night, as Raimundo sat by the fire, his father, Revelino, came into the room and he sat down next to him. And the two just sat there quietly, periodically poking at the fire with a stick and just sitting there enjoying the silence. And as these two were sitting there, suddenly Raimundo heard a strange sound coming from the kitchen. And he saw this dark figure on all fours quickly kind of maneuvering across the ground out of sight. And immediately Raimundo's terrified. He has no idea what this is. And so instinctively he turns to his dad, and his dad is also staring at the kitchen, wide-eyed, clearly having seen the same thing. And then before Raimundo could do anything, his dad jumped up and slammed the door shut, separating them from the kitchen, and locked it. But eventually, Revelino and his sons began to hear voices, and they were coming from outside the shack. Whoever was out there, or whatever was out there, was talking about Revelino. They could hear that name, and what they were kind of saying is, if Revelino comes out here, we're going to kill him. And at that point, Revelino told his sons to stay put, and he was going to go out there and investigate. He's got a knife in hand, just in case Revelino went outside. And that was the last time the boys ever spoke to their father. 6 months later, on March 10th, 1963, 5 men were out hunting in the wilderness not far from Raimundo's family's shack. And at some point, they came across this huge boulder, and this boulder had a big crevice in it, like a big gap in this rock. And one of the hunters happened to walk past it and looked into this crevice, and they found a skeleton. And that skeleton belonged to Revelino, Raimundo's father. But that was not the end of the story. Far from it. So on the day that Revelino stepped out the front door and then was never heard from again, Raimundo and his brothers had been instructed by their dad to stay put while Revelino went out looking around. But Raimundo just felt really nervous after his dad had stepped out the front door and had presumably stepped outside. So he defied his father. He opened up the door that led outside. He saw his dad stepping into this huge cloud of yellow smoke. And amidst this smoke were these like cylindrical objects that were floating in the air, spinning around in a circle, seemingly spitting out this smoke. And Raimundo, he had no idea what he was looking at. And so Raimundo yelled out for his dad, like, "Dad, where are you going?" And he charged towards his father to try to stop him. But as soon as Raimundo went out into the yellow smoke, the smoke just dissipated, the cylinders disappeared, and as soon as it was all gone, his dad was gone too. And so quickly, Raimundo and his brothers alerted authorities, and they launched the search for him, and for days they combed the area near that boulder as well, and they couldn't find Revelino. And so eventually they abandoned the search. And then 6 months later, his body was magically found in that crevice. To this day, nobody knows what actually happened to Revelino and how he wound up inside of that rock crevice.
People that even the FBI can't explain. The disappearance of Lars Mittank. Lars Mittank was a 28-year-old tourist from Germany who went on a beach vacation in Bulgaria in 2014. Just a few days later, he'd vanish in one of the creepiest disappearances ever caught on camera. After getting into a small fight at the resort, Lars injured his ear and wasn't allowed to fly home with his friends. So he stayed behind by himself, and that's when things got really weird. He started texting his mom, saying some men were following him and that he didn't feel safe. He even asked her to cancel his bank cards because he was scared someone might get access to his money. The next morning, Lars went to the airport to catch his flight home. Security cameras showed him sitting calmly in a doctor's office for a quick checkup. Then out of nowhere, he suddenly stood up, grabbed his bag, took off running, sprinted through the terminal, climbed over the airport fence, and disappeared into a nearby forest. That's the last confirmed footage of Lars Mittank ever. No confirmed sightings, no contact, and no clear answers. To this day, nobody knows what made him run.
Teenagers reacting to getting life sentences. This is 18-year-old TJ Lane. On the morning of February 27, 2012, he opened fire in his cafeteria in his high school, unaliving 3 students. On his court date, he wore a shirt that said killer to taunt the families.
And pull the trigger to kill your son, you know, masturbates and whatever. Fuck all of you.
Even flipping some of the families off while they cried, as they discussed on how they felt about losing their children. He's been given life without the possibility of parole.
Imagine going to check on your neighbor one morning after noticing that the grocery store they own hasn't opened yet. You know your neighbor's family pretty well, so you know that this is unusual for them. And it's even more suspicious when you get to their house and you notice that their front door has been left open. But nothing could have prepared you for what you would find. On the morning of July 1st, 2018, 11 members of the Chundawat family were found dead, and their bodies were ritualistically arranged to look like the hanging roots of a banyan tree. This case is so terrifying and heartbreaking, not only because the youngest member was only 15 and the eldest was their 80-year-old grandmother, but also because the Chundawat family were really well respected, and there were literally no signs that anything like this could have happened. So why did the police ultimately rule the motivation as shared psychosis, where a delusion spreads through a family like an infection? The Chundawat family lived in a 3-story house in Barauri, India. 3 generations lived under one roof. In 2007, Lalit's father died of natural causes, and after this, Lalit started exhibiting some behavioral changes. Allegedly, he stopped speaking for 3 years, convinced that his father's spirit was communicating with him, until one day he informs the rest of his family that he has been possessed by his father's soul. Since 2007, Lalit and 2 other members of the family, Priyanka and Neetu, starts writing in a diary of Lalit's father's instructions. These instructions included how to make the family more spiritually pure and disciplined, as well as daily rituals, practices, and strict rules. Essentially, Lalit was at a turning point where he was trying to convince the rest of his family to follow his vision without any question, to submit to his ideas and see them as divine instead of as a delusion. 45-year-old Lalit Chundawat became convinced that his dead father was possessing him, and he spent 11 years writing handwritten notes, rituals, and instructions until he became convinced that his entire family would be saved if they performed a ritual. His belief allegedly was that his family would not die but be saved by his father's spirit, and this is the belief that led to the fateful night of June 30th, 2018. The ritual included blindfolds, gags, hand ties, and lots of planning on how the family members would be arranged around the iron frame in their roof that was used for ventilation. Investigators in the case mentioned that from the handwritten notes that they found in the house, that there were repeated mentions of this term, which refers to the worshipping of the banyan tree. This is what a banyan tree looks like, and it has roots kind of hanging down. The family members were supposed to replicate this type of formation with their bodies. Police found no forced entry, no struggle, and no external involvement. There was even evidence that family members helped tie each other up, seemingly fully cooperating with the ritual, which I think is also why police ultimately ruled the motivation behind this as shared psychosis. The grandmother was the only one not found in this tree formation. She was discovered in another room in the house. All other members of the family were found hanging from the mesh in their ceiling, close together, their face wrapped with cloth from the same bed sheet, their ears plugged with cotton, their mouths taped, and their hands behind their back. Lalit's diary also mentions how after the ritual is done, everybody would help untie each other's hands, which indicates that he did not believe that his family would pass away from the ritual. According to psychologists, these events were caused by shared psychotic disorder, and Lalit likely had delusional disorder. However, there are some people who believe that this was a well-planned murder instead of a shared delusion, and the entire event could have been planned by Lalit and his wife, who were the only ones with their hands open instead of tied. This chilling tragedy really sheds light on the dangers of blind faith, and how you can never know what's going on behind closed doors even though it seems like there were no signs. If you watched to the end of this video, thank you so much. This was my first try at this type of storytelling and content, so I really appreciate you all, and make sure to follow for more.
Did a doctor instruct Lindsay to tell her husband that she heard those voices? This is a bombshell that came out in court this morning. I'll still be doing a full trial day recap this evening, but I need to hear from you on this right now. This is Dan Lawler. He is with the state police, and he was at one point at the hospital where Lindsay was, and he was questioned today about Dr. Paul Zeisel, the forensic psychologist who met with Lindsay after she was hospitalized on January 24th, 2023. Now, we all know that Lindsay called Patrick from the hospital saying that she heard a man's voice and experienced what she called a moment of psychosis. That call happened on February 6th, and the call came from Dr. Zeisel's cell phone. Patrick told investigators that she had never previously said she was hearing voices, and she had never used the word psychosis with him before. Well, today, Attorney Reddington asked this law enforcement officer about conversations that he had with the lead investigator on the case. This witness testified that the lead investigator told him that the government's theory was that Dr. Zeisel had instructed Lindsay to say that she heard voices. That felt like a bombshell to me, that she had potentially been instructed, or there was a theory that she had been instructed by a doctor to tell Patrick that she heard voices. But I want to be very, very clear, this witness did not say that he heard Zeisel tell Lindsay that. He did not overhear any of their conversation. He was only testifying about what the lead investigator told him that the government's theory was. And then when the Commonwealth did redirect, they said, hey, you know, in your position in law enforcement, you often talk to other officers about theories, and he did confirm that. I wanted to bring this to you immediately to get your thoughts. What do you think about testimony that the lead investigator told another officer that the government's theory was that Dr. Zeisel instructed Lindsay to tell Patrick that she was hearing voices? Let me know your thoughts on that. I'll see you this evening for the full Day 12 recap, and most importantly, as always, rest in peace to the 3 children at the center of this case and trial, Cora, Dawson, and Callan.
They coated her in flour and then fried her on the stove. In 1997, 27-year-old Joan Triblett was expecting her 5th child with her boyfriend, 29-year-old Everett Johnson. They both lived in Chicago, Illinois, and they already had a 16-month-old baby named Anquanique Triblett. Unfortunately, due to their evil hearts and souls, she never got to explore what the future had in store for her. On the night of December 19th of 1997, Anquanique woke up in the middle of the night crying, as most babies do. She pulled the blankets numerous times to get her parents' attention, but they were very unhappy with her. Joan ordered her to stand at the end of the bed until she stopped crying and felt sleepy, but by mistake, Anquanique pulled the blanket again, and Joan strangled her. She continued to suffocate her until she fell unconscious and went back to sleep. A few minutes later, Anquanique regained consciousness and she started crying once again, and instead of Joan comforting her, she got even more aggressive. She grabbed a wooden paddle and beat her multiple times until forcing her into the bed. Then Everett grabbed the paddle and struck her everywhere until she fell on his arms and stopped breathing. Out of panic, they both tried to revive her with cold water, but Anquanique was gone. They then laid her face down on the bed and went to sleep. They hoped that she would be okay in the morning, but sadly that wasn't the case. That following morning, they both agreed to dispose of her body in the most gruesome way. Joan suggested that they cut her into little pieces and feed her to stray dogs, but Everett suggested that they get rid of her body by putting her into acid, just like they do in the movies. Together, they combined their sick ideas and dragged her lifeless body to the bathroom. They then covered the bathroom floor with newspapers and started cutting her up. Joan chopped off her hands and forearms, coated them in seasoned flour, and then fried them in hot oil. She then gave those pieces to stray dogs while they were trying to figure out what to do with the rest of her body because neighbors were complaining of a strong smell and smoke. That following morning, Everett was on his way to work. He removed Anquanique's spine and threw it in some bushes, and on his way back home, he bought a large pot and battery acid. They then pulled her head and placed her other remains before filling it with battery acid. They occasionally stirred the pot over the next few days before everything had dissolved. Once that was done, they poured the liquid down the drain, borrowed a blender from a neighbor, and blended her skull. The fluid was then flushed down the toilet, and some of it had been poured in a nearby sewer. The couple then continued with their lives like nothing had happened. 6 months later, Anquanique's grandmother had reported her as missing after getting different stories about her whereabouts. Both parents ended up being arrested and eventually confessed. However, Joan accepted a plea deal for a reduced sentence if she were to testify against Everett. She stated he was the one responsible for ending her life and cutting up her body, and she was only an accomplice. Ultimately, Joan was charged with murder and given 60 years in prison. On the other hand, the presiding judge refused to give Everett the death penalty, and he was sentenced to 100 years in prison. However, in 2005, Joan retracted her statement, and she said she had nothing to do with her daughter's death and Everett was to blame for everything. She told the judge that she lied about being present because she was scared that Everett would continue abusing her and her children if he didn't go to jail. According to her, the day Anquanique died, Everett took her body, and when he returned back, he told her that he was never going to tell her where he buried her and to not tell anyone. To this day, none of Anquanique's remains have ever been found, and she never had a funeral or a burial. As for the 3 other children who were living with them, they were placed into the state care and then handed over to their aunt.
You can see the terror in his eyes. This is the last photo of him alive. September 2006 in buzzing Las Vegas, when 2 people laid eyes on each other for the first time. This was Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias. Travis was a Mormon salesman and was just in town for a work convention when he laid eyes on Jodi Arias. Now, she was a stunning blonde freelance photographer, and it felt like the pair just had this instant spark. There was a crazy chemistry, and he was so certain he'd met the one for him. He told his friends, "I've just met my future wife." And it was a little tricky because they'd met in Vegas, but it was kind of long distance. Jodi lived in California and Travis was from Arizona. But the pair were like, do you know what? We really care about each other. We like each other so much that we're just gonna make it work. Jodi was so obsessed with Travis that she even decided to convert to Mormonism just a few months after they met so that their lives were in sync. There was trouble in paradise. Being Mormon, you're not supposed to you know what until after marriage, but the pair were definitely doing this. And despite the fact that he was very much a willing participant in this, he would then afterwards feel really guilty and send Jodi a bunch of abuse. He called her the S word in texts, and she would give him abuse back. The pair became really, really toxic, just constantly on and off, constantly really intense and then really, really horrible to each other. And one friend said to Travis, "We're afraid we're going to find you chopped up in a freezer." Now the pair just got more and more toxic, and Travis decided to call things off. He ended up deciding that he wanted to actually date other people instead. But classic toxic relationship, they did kind of stay in touch with each other and did meet up occasionally. And this kind of fueled Jodi's unhealthy, toxic obsession with Travis. Travis. She ended up hacking into his social media to spy on his conversations with other women. She snuck into his house at one point just to see what he was up to. She even slashed his tires in a jealous rage. And sometimes Travis would be raging about this. He'd be so angry and upset. And other times he'd just hop into bed with her. His friends were obviously concerned. They were saying, you need to totally cut it off with this woman. She's dangerous. And they were even more terrified when he replied to them saying, don't be surprised if you find me dead one day. On the 9th of June 2008, Travis's friends were all discussing the trip that they had planned to Cancun. Travis had been absolutely buzzing for this trip, so it was kind of weird that he wasn't answering their texts in terms of arranging it. He tried rationalizing it, but it got to a point where they'd just not heard from him in so long that they decided, let's just go around to his house and see what's going on. But as they opened the door and crept through the apartment, they were like, is that a bloody handprint on the wall? Just meters away, Travis's cold, lifeless body lay on the floor in a pool of his own blood. I can't even imagine finding a stranger like that, let alone your best friend. And this was obviously no accident. He hadn't just slipped in the shower and fallen. He was in a horrific state. He'd been shot in the head and stabbed 27 times. His friends couldn't make sense of what the hell they were seeing. They could barely speak, barely breathe. One thing they did know though was Jody was definitely involved. Now, when police raced over there, they all blurted out how crazy his ex was and how she was obviously involved, the abuse, the stalking, the erratic behaviour, and they thought that they'd seen enough to haunt them for the rest of their lives. Wait until you hear what was inside of the washing machine. Now, the forensic team obviously had to meticulously scour the crime scene, get every piece of evidence they possibly could. They were swabbing everything, they were collecting pieces of evidence, and inside the washing machine they were like, hang on, is that something like metal? It was a camera. As they flicked through, the camera painted a disturbing picture of the events leading up to Travis's death. Timestamp photos from the 4th of June showing Travis and Jody in bed together. The next photo showed him lying dead in a pool of his own blood. Probably goes without saying that police immediately raced over, found Jody and arrested her. And bizarrely she was like, no, I wasn't even with him that day. Why would she lie when there's a camera at the crime scene documenting everything with dates and times? When they were like, well, we found the camera, like, we know you were, she then decided to change her story. Rather than just admitting what she had done, she came up with this wild kind of fictional tale about how armed robbers had broken in and threatened her and killed him. But nothing was stolen from the scene, and that still didn't explain why a armed intruder would then take a photo to document the crime. She did decide to plead not guilty, but then in court the prosecution was like, okay, it's just kind of a weird coincidence that a gun went missing from your grandparents' house the day of the murder. And it turned out it was the exact same weapon that was used in the crime. Also just a weird coincidence that your DNA, Jody, was on that bloody handprint. She then tried to say this was all self-defense and he started attacking me, so I had to attack him back. Then the jury heard that Travis had actually uninvited her on the Cancun trip, and there were rumours that he'd invited another woman. The whole thing made a lot more sense. We've got a motive. Finally, people saw that she had killed him in a jealous rage, and they found her guilty. She ultimately did get given life in prison, but it will never bring Travis back. For more cases like this, I post a brand new episode on my podcast, The Born Investigation, every single week.